Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Alexis. I'm a blind author and content creator. And today I am reviewing, finally, the third book in the Flesh and Fire series. I recorded this about maybe a year or two ago, but I have a bunch of reviews from that time that I just haven't posted, which I'm trying to post now. And for this video, I'm actually going to combine two videos that I recorded. I'm going to do the same thing I did for the Letters of Enchantment by Rebecca Ross, where I combined Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. So that's what I will be doing. So the bulk of this video is going to be my review, and then the next part is going to be the predictions I had at that time. As of recording this intro, I have not read book 4. And I don't know when I will read it, but hopefully soon, because the Blood and Ash series has its sixth book out, and I also want to read that. And I need to catch up with a bunch of stuff I have not read. So that's where we are. So with that out of the way, I am going to let you enjoy the video, and hopefully, it'll be a fun time for you. And also, in advance, thank you so much for joining me for the next hour or so. Okay, you guys, so I finally read A Fire in the Flesh, and I have some things to say. I love this book, of course. But let's talk about the synopsis, and then I'll tell you, everything else, because I'm sure you're wondering about the title a little bit. So here we go. The only thing that can save the realms now is the one thing more powerful than the fates. After a startling betrayal ends with both Sarah and the dangerously seductive ruler of the Shadowlands, she has fallen madly in love with, being held captive by the false king of the gods. There is only one thing that can free Nyktos and prevent the forces of the Shadowlands from invading Delos and igniting a war of primals. Convincing Colas won't be easy, though, not even with a lifetime of training. While his most favored revenant is insistent that she is nothing more than a lie, Colas's erratic nature and twisted sense of honor leave her shaken to the core, and nothing could have prepared her for the cruelty of his court or the shocking truths revealed. The revelations not only upend what she has understood about her duty and the very creation of the realms, but also draw into question exactly what the true threat is. However, surviving Colas is only one part of the battle. The ascension is upon her, and Sarah is out of time. But Nyktos will do anything to keep Sarah alive and give her the life she deserves. He'll even risk the utter destruction of the realms, and that's exactly what will happen if he doesn't ascend as the primal of life. Yet, despite his desperate determination, their destinies may be out of their hands. But there is that foreseen, unexpected thread, the unpredictable, unknown, and unwritten, the only thing more powerful than the fates. All right, you guys. So we know that the thing more powerful than the fates is love. If you have not read, if you have read like the stuff, honestly, I have made some. I've loved this. First of all, it did give me Harry Potter vibes with the whole like, love, and like it's more powerful than anything, because it's like in Harry Potter, love is the most powerful magic of all, and it serves as a charm and so on and so forth. But this one is just more interesting. This one's just great. They're both good. It's just that this one's just more interesting in the romantic sense. Anywho, my non-spoilery thoughts, however. because this will mostly be spoilers. To the best of my ability, I need to be honest and say that I'm recording this weeks after I read it, like maybe 2, 3 weeks after I read it. So my memory might be a little here and there. So I'll do my best though, because I have some things I want to say. I'll talk about some of the major stuff, minor stuff, anything I can remember, and anything I can't, I'll just put in editing and stuff like that because. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk. So, non spoilery thoughts. I love this book. I like this third book. It's really, really interesting to be in Colis's court, and also generally just be in that thing, and also when reading it, making some connections to stuff in Blood and Ash, particularly in the War of Two Queens, which I am currently rereading because A Soul of Ash and Blood came out last year. So I want to reread that and then see where we go from there. So, and I also have a slight prediction of on that, and we'll talk about that later. I have some predictions. I got some questions, y'all. And yeah, okay. Anywho, so here we go. I enjoyed this. I particularly really like the way that we portray Colas and the way he is, the way we saw how he kind of seems to still have some, like, he still, there are still some like parts of him that are just interesting, maybe not good, nothing to be excused, but in how, but there are things that I just find really really interesting that were portrayed, like his feelings for his brother, that he still loves him, but he just for some reason had has like a really twisted, like has found a way to twist everything to make it so that everything is, well, his fault, and stuff like, not his fault but like everyone else's fault. So yeah, that I found really delightfully interesting. So that's where we are. That is like the most non-spoiler I can get. So if you have not read A Fire in the Flesh, which I don't know why you haven't, it's time to go if you don't want any spoilers. So the book automatically starts off exactly where A Light in the Flame kind of left off, with her being captured, and Colas being told that she is Zutoria. Um, and he is like, at first it's unbelievable for him, and like and one person, his favorite revenant, Callum, is kind of like, no, that can't possibly be true or whatever, like he says some of this stuff. And then also at the end of the book, we also have that Sarah sees a white wolf like in the roof, and then she realizes it's Ash because she remembers she had like these dreams, I think, throughout the book, if I remember correctly, in the second one, where she sees a white wolf as she's like as she's swimming. One of them was even she recalls seeing a white wolf, um where she um where she was like carrying a bunch of rocks, and it was like looking at her kind of like, why are you doing that, kind of thing. So we see that. So Ash shows up and ends up trying to free her, and unfortunately ends up captured and in stasis. So that is how they both end up captured. And of course his forces with Nectus aren't gonna let it go until aren't gonna let him go until Nyctos is released. I should, before I continue, give some content warnings for sexual assault in the book. It does come up both in discussion and somewhat explicitly. Um, yeah, it's bad. It's not handled bad, but like the scene is just like, it's disgusting, and especially what happens after. It's not like I don't know how to explain it, but just know that it's there. So that happens, and then Sarah ends up captured, and I don't remember how this happens, but Sarah almost dies. But here's the thing, she almost dies, and this is where we make our first connection to Blood and Ash. Um, and I found it kind of interesting. So Sarah almost dies. So he wants to bring her. He doesn't want her to die, of course, because he thinks that's Zutoria. So Colas goes to Thanos, the primal of the seas, and asks him to do what he can because he's holding her from dying, but he's like, I don't have enough embers of life, basically, I guess, or like I don't have the power to stop this and to bring her back. It's basically what he's saying, which is basically a thing. Like it's why he can't, like, because he's not the true primal of life. Basically, we can assume that is where what he meant. So what happens is, turns out he has this is where we get our first connection because we meet the Siren. Now the Siren are kind of like mermaids. They're basically, I think they have like half human bodies, if I remember correctly, and like they're like in water creatures, but they have like, I think, some human parts or something. But they were mainly like they mainly live in the water. And the Siren are Thanos' people. And so what they do is they give her their lives, and but unfortunately they die. And Thanos literally tells her, I hope you remember the gift you were given here, um, especially considering it probably won't last that long. And so that is what they do. They give her their lives in exchange for hers. So in Blood and Ash, we do mention the Siren in passing, where they talk about the Siren dying, and what they mention is that they think that they probably died because they got depressed and they couldn't like breed or something like that. Um, or something related to Sion, who is now known as the god of the seas in Blood and Ash. Now, I think it's really interesting because I think we may have just found out how they died, and it has to do with Sarah. Unless there were more Siren in there, that would be how they would have died, and that is a really tragic death. It's genuinely really sad. Like, can you imagine? Like, this is how these people just die. It's like it's basically a it's basically like you just gave your life for this other person, but also like it may just be the extinction of the entire civilization, and also it may not even last that long. So they died for things, for like they took a risk, basically. And Colas, of course, doesn't care, and so on and so forth. So yeah, she's alive, and that's what he cares about. So another connection made to Blood and Ash is Solus, but that's because we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so then she's of course throughout the story, she she goes through a lot with Colas, um, who has a very twisted sense of love, um, and gets very angry when she displeases him in any way. So the second connection to Blood and Ash is Solus, and I mentioned this because the kingdom in Blood and Ash is Solus, but throughout the story, Colas calls Sarah Solus. Now, Colas apparently has a significance in the name. I forgot what it was, but Solus means my soul. Now, here's a theory that I have. Here's a theory. Now, Solus sounds like it sounds like it was named after him because in in the War of Two Queens, as Poppy is taking over Solus, the in the name of Atlantia, when she encounters the priests and priestesses, and also the you know, any other ascended, they talk about serving the true king of the realms. And Isbeth, aka Ileana, also talks about the remaking of the realms in the name of the true king of realms. And they are referring to Colas, as we kind of later find out. We know from the other books that basically oh sorry, we know from the other books that Malek loved Isbeth and everything, and he told her everything about the gods and the primals, and he knows all of that. They talked about how we know that he explains like the differences, and that he turned her into a demis, which is like a false god. They have like godly power, but it's false, and they and we know that to be the case. So she knows about Colas, probably about everything that happened before that even, and she definitely knows everything about Seraphina before Seraphina kills her in the War of Two Queens. So we know that. So, and at the time, though, before that, the question is why? What was the? Because eventually, like the Ascended made their own little kingdom. Like they were allowed to thrive in Atlantia, but then they were becoming too much, and they so there was a war, and the last battle was in Pompeii, and they eventually they got quote unquote pushed back, and the Ascended now have their own kingdom where they rule alongside where Jalara and Ileana rule. Um, but they're still kind of at war. Like the War of Two Kings never fully ended, basically. And so that's the case. And then there's Atlantia. So the question here is, was it named Solus before Ileana or Isbeth appeared? Like, was that the first? Was that the first? Like, was it named that before, or was it named that after when she was there? If because if it's after, then she knew about Zutoria and everything that came with it. Then again, we don't know how much Seraphina and Niktos revealed about her past um with Colas and about Zutoria and everything that they did. Although there seems to be a connection, because they talk about in the books about like a diamond that everyone coveted that was imperfect, and how Ileana used it to illustrate to Poppy that sometimes the most beautiful things have like uh almost like edges, or like they're like marked in certain ways, because she was very insecure about her scars and everything, while Ileana is kind of like, she got her like a porcelain dolls, but also like the um she also tried to make her feel better with it, with like showing her this diamond that everyone coveted, that had like a bunch of things that were kind of quote unquote imperfect, but it made it unique basically. And that sounds like the star that is shown, that appears in Flesh and in what in A Fire in the Flesh. So that's kind of where that I think that comes from. But if it was named after, though, known as My Soul, that means that Ileana would know about Zatoria, and maybe as an homage to Colas, she named the king. They named the kingdom Solus. That's what I can come up with. That it was in homage, since he absolutely adored Zutoria, basically. So that's kind of an interesting one. The next things that happen, Sarah tries to escape and ends up finding out about the Ascended. So we know that the Ascended slash Vampires existed way before they were originally created in they were originally created, and how and stuff like that. Like we know that to be the case. They were definitely there before. But Atlantia was not. Atlantia was definitely created from what we gather so far in the 4 books of Blood and Ash. Atlantia was created much before, because there was Lasagna, and that was eventually ruled by Ezra, and then there was Atlantia. Is my understanding, and then there was Atlantia and Solus. So that is kind of what I'm getting here. So my question then is here, where the Ascended were created there with them. So what happened before everyone else knew about the Ascended, if that makes sense? Not before, like after everything with that, like what happened with that? That's the question. That's the question I have, because if the Ascended were created there, that means that some of them probably lived for a long time. And one of them specifically is Jacinda, that I was mentioning. So Jacinda is the basically Duchess Tierman. She is the one of Poppy's guardians. And then but there was someone in the book named Jacinta, which is pretty close. And I'm assuming it might be the same chosen person. And they who she attempted who Sarah attempted to defend, because she thought it was unconsensual, the thing that was happening to with between her and a god, and he was taking her blood because she appeared to be in pain and stuff like that. And Colas suggested that it was unconsensual, so she killed that person, because basically in that specific scene she said, if I knew it was unconsensual, I would kill that person. And he pointed out someone and implied that it was unconsensual, but then realized too late that it wasn't, and it was him getting back at Keela for not for basically, I guess, being quote unquote disloyal, and also for I think some for questioning the validity of Sarah being with Colas, since she was Nyctos's consort. So that was part of the thing. But Jacinta was there, like she was a chosen. So I makes me wonder, is Jacinta then A, older than the queen, than Ileana, or B, is Jacinta another person? So is it the same, or a different person? And if it's the same person, then it would she would be maybe centuries old, because pretty sure this happened century like that Flesh and Fire was centuries before Blood and Ash. So that's the interesting part. Those are the questions I have. Oh, we're making so many connections, you guys. I'm enjoying it. So we have that. And so she discovers that she Colas speaks to her for the most part in a way of trust, where he kind of wants her to be, he wants to like make her happy, if you will. And he wants to demonstrate that he loves her. So he talks to her, she attempts to be kind of getting on his good side, both uh by lying and giving some truths and stuff like that. There are moments when he sleeps with her. I don't mean sexually, I mean they just share a bed, because that is something he wants. And she's like, okay, I need to figure out how to kill him, become his weakness or whatever, right? Until she eventually discovers he can't really be killed, because he is the true primal of death, and there will be like balance problems. But basically, she does that. He kind of wants to make things so that she's comfortable. But then there is Callum, who is convinced, rightfully so, that Sarah is not Zutoria. And we find out why that is, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And it is basically the theory that they had in A Light in the Flame is correct. We'll talk about it in a minute. But basically, he's convinced. And the reason he's convinced is because Zutoria is his sister. Yes, you heard me. Zutoria is Callum's sister. Now that was an interesting revelation, because basically what basically happened is, yeah, he was he saw her, like she we know what happened. She was like picking up flowers. This feels like the Persephone thing, but without him kidnapping her. It just gets weirder instead. We know that Zatoria's story was that she was picking flowers. Colas fell in love with her the moment he saw her, so he approached and said hi, and she got freaked out and fell off a cliff. Um, and I think it says in the story that he attempted to apologize to the parents or something, but I don't know what happened with that. I think the parents just didn't accept it. Um, but Callum blames himself for Zatoria's death for not being there to protect her, basically. And she he and Colas he talked to Colas and asks, I think he asked if he could like serve him anyway or something, to, I guess, to make it up or whatever. I don't remember what he asked, but it ended with, oh, trigger warning for committing suicide. Um, it ended up with him basically killing himself, and then he was turned into a revenant, and now he is extremely loyal to Colas, which interesting. And he was able to see her when she was brought back to life again, and stuff like that, and she remembered, I guess she remembered him, which is why he doesn't understand like why Sarah doesn't remember him. But what's really interesting is the theory that they have in A Light in the Flame is that Sarah has two souls, and that is confirmed in this book a little bit later. But what's interesting about the this specific thing is that she is able to somehow like feel Zatoria, since they have two souls. Like she's able to sometimes feel when she's afraid, and uh and stuff like that, and she's able to get access to her memory somehow, because there's some communication between them, which is how she seems to be have been able to keep the whole thing. Now, the sexual assault scene I mentioned, trigger warning because I'm going to discuss it. It is disturbing. Basically, at some point in the story, he takes Sarah's blood again and he feeds on her, and she has no choice but to stay there, of course. But he rubs himself against her, I believe, and he ends up climaxing. To which he then apologizes and says, "I have shamed myself, and I've also shamed you." And she is rightfully kind of like, what the fuck happened? Like, she felt terrible, and she felt very uh dirty and a little like insecure about that stuff, and it comes up a little bit later too. And then it turns out worse, because he tells her, though, um I've been waiting for you, though clearly you have not. And she's like, what? And he's like, since you, there has been no one else. I haven't been with anyone, but you have been more than happy to basically open your legs to anyone, including basically his nephew. And he's like, but I forgive you, though, since you don't remember our past. And I'm like, oh, purity culture bullshit. No, not in this book. But it somehow makes sense for Colas. Ugh, it was disgusting. It was horrible. That was the scene. He never did it again, but she struggles a little where she's like, I mean, it could have been worse or whatever. And then she's like, no, no, this was bad. I can't say it could have been worse, because he didn't like penetrate me. And I was like, okay, good. It was handled and it was recognized. I appreciate that. But oh god, that was really, really disgusting to read. I'm like, ugh, purity culture bullshit. No, 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 not in my books. Eventually, though, there's another one that happens, but it was a bit weird, because we get to see, because court. Uh, he holds court, and he takes her with him, and she decides to make it a thing where he's like, where she literally tells him, I thought when you were there we were gonna spend time together. He's like, I'd love nothing more than to do that, but I have to hold court to it. She's like, okay. Two things happen where she's able to convince him not to do certain things. well, not in court. First, before court, I think it is Theon that tries to rescue her, and she's like, no, no, you can't do that. He tells her to try to get, like, he tells her, destroy this palace, do what you can so we can get out. And she's like, she has to figure out, no, wait, not Theon, it was Rain. And she has to, like, figure out how to save him. So she tells him, so she eventually convinces Colas at some point to be like, no, like, release him back to the people. That way you can inspire loyalty and show that you're a benevolent king. And though he doesn't agree at first, she eventually manages to do so. And he's like, okay, yes, I can show some loyalty by returning him. And he does. Rain is released. And she even convinces him to release Nyktos for similar reasons. And he eventually agrees, but he has to, like, take him out of stasis. And anything that she does that could displease him kind of delays the release, basically. And then at court, you have, of course, Keela asking about oh, wait, the other reason too that Colas is convinced that she's Victoria is because they have Ione, a goddess who is mentioned in Blood and Ash as being, I think, the goddess of rebirth. I think she basically takes Keela's place. She is summoned to basically check for that and read her mind. At first she's like really freaked out and tells him, like, I had a really bad experience with one of your gods who did that. It was very painful. And he doesn't want to put her under any pain whatsoever. But he does it anyway. He's like, make it as quickly as possible. I do not want her to feel any pain. And Sarah is freaked out because she's like, great, if this goddess discovers the truth, she can tell him and I'm basically dead. And Ione, though, lies and says, yes, she has the soul of someone named Zutoria, and in the past, and she tells him about that, and she tells him pretty much every lie that Sarah has said, which convinces Colas. Ione makes the mistake of calling her consort, and he's like, no, that's not the case, and you can't call it, that's not her title. And he's like, oh, I was under the impression this was the case. And he's like, no, I did not approve. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry. So she leaves, and then court happens, where Keela is like, concerned about her being the Nyktos' consort and being there against her will. And that is solved by him saying, no, she's not, and I didn't approve it. And she's like, okay, great. And other things happen with that, with him in that court. And I'm pretty sure that's also where the death thing happens with Jacinta, but I could be wrong. It could be the second one. But he wants to make, at some point though, she decides to try to look for the star that holds Nyktos' dad, and she does so by since at some point Colas made her upset. He wants to make it up to her, and he's like, what do you want? Do you want, like, a dog, books? What do you want? Anything, right? And she tells him, my mother had this diamond at some point, and it looked really different, and I always wanted to do that, but I was never able to touch it. And he's like, I could make her tell her where it is. Like, no, anything would suffice, like any old diamond would suffice. And when she describes, like, I want something, like, different, like, that looks very unique, he's like, I have such a diamond, and I can show you. And they went back to this cage that he keeps her in. And it turns out there's, like, a star. It's a star. And that's what keeps his soul. And she was able to, she used the embers unintentionally to realize that is ethos. And that I thought was kind of interesting. He got mad because she used the embers. She's used the embers a few times in the story by this point, and he's mad because he tells her, you can't use the embers. They're basically her embers or whatever. But he doesn't want to kill her, so he's like, you can't use those. And he's like, okay. And she's like, she still uses them a couple times, but she does. But this is where she kind of gets angry, and she gets angry enough to, I think, to, like, attack him. quite heavily, and she even um and at some point she's so powerful though that she literally pulls Niktos out of stasis. Niktos shows up, asking where she is, and kills all the guards, and they end up leaving. And before that, though, we have Actus as well, who ends up meeting them and helping them out, because it turns out he did betray them at the end, but it turns out he didn't want to do it out of like, he had to do it because more people would die, basically, as well as like he wants to save Zatoria because he got to meet Zatoria back then. And I have a theory that he fell in love with Zatoria, but basically Actus wants to help her, save her, because he met her that time and he got to talk to her, and because he was also Ethos's friend, and he wants to do what's right, but he ended up sacrificing Sarah and ends up helping her here and there about and getting her information, escape, and whatever she really needed. Eventually, when she escapes, though, by this time they realize that that Colas cannot die because he is the true primal of death. And this is where we find out also in the story, she finds out that in the star, if anything, the star could keep Zatoria's soul. And this is where a theory comes in for me. Um so I okay, so basically once they escaped after everything, there was a point where they have to release they end up releasing uh though she probably shouldn't have because she needed some rest. They end up releasing Ethos's soul, and Niktos gets to see him, and basically he tells Ethos tells Niktos something, but I don't remember what it was, and Niktos was like, yeah, I understand or whatever, and then he leaves to Arcadia. Also in this book, Bele rises a primal, um, and I thought that was awesome. Because the primal that was there basically kind of just died, and now she rises as a new primal, so that's awesome. And yeah, so they get her they end up that happens, and then they end up getting Zutoria's soul and putting it in the star. And the idea was that basically people didn't fully know what Ethos was planning when he put her soul in and the Ember in the Mirel bloodline. And basically they don't know what he was attempting to do. So he but it clearly did not work. Right? Right. And previously as well, there is a thing where they say that one thing that can't be created is a primal of life and death that basically holds both things. So that's kind of like the interesting things. And we find out in previous books, and I mentioned this for a reason, by the way, we find out in previous books as well that if Niktos forms a bond with someone, he can't judge them when they reach the Pillars of the Death. They're judged by the RA, which is basically the fates. So these are important things, I think, to note, because the ascension, Sarah's ascension is eventually coming, and she thinks she's gonna die, but that the Ember is gonna go to Niktos. So they take Zutoria's soul from the star, from Sarah, and Zutoria says, "We'll meet again," before she is placed in the diamond, which is then given to Actus to keep safe. Now she says we'll meet again. Now, my theory. What if Poppy is Zutoria? Now, listen, this makes sense. This makes sense to me. I could be wrong, but this makes sense. Because she'll have to be born again. Like, the idea is to keep her soul in the star until she is able to be reborn again. And in the book, we got the one thing we got. Part of the reason that Actus wants to save Zutoria is because she is the only one that will be able to kill Colas. Now, originally we thought that it was because she is his weakness, because he's in love with her. But what if it's Poppy, and the reason Colas will finally be able to die is because Poppy is the primal of life and death. After all, she is the granddaughter of Nyktos and Sarah. And for some reason, the primal, I can't remember what reason was given in the War of Two Queens, I'm still there, but for some reason, the first primal that was born it has to be the first female in the Mirel bloodline, which could have actually been Millicent, but she did not fully survive the culling, and for some reason that didn't happen. But Poppy is the second daughter. I'm starting to think it has something to do with the second daughter, but I'm not too sure how that worked out. But it has to be it was in the Murrell bloodline, and it was as a in a female member. It probably had something to do with Sarah, but I really don't fully know. I can't quite remember the exact details. I'll probably remember them when I edit, and then I'm gonna be like, oh god damn it. Anyway, so that's something we learned, right? So what if basically the thing is not because of love, it's because she is the primal of life and death. So theoretically, in this case, Colas could not die. He had to be put to sleep because he was the true primal of death, and thus if he was asleep rather than dead, balance was maintained in the realms. There was life and there was death. Nyktos was not originally the primal of death. He was basically kind of like, it was just given to him. It was like almost like thrust upon him, because originally Ethos was the primal of life and Colas was the primal of death, and they got along until he fell in love with Zutoria, and Ethos did not bring her back to life because she went beyond the veil and found peace. Basically, that was like the rule. And then eventually Colas found the way to switch their roles, but in the end they still maintained an ember or or embers of who they were originally. So Colas has some embers of death, and Ethos has embers of life, and embers that came with and eventually though some embers also transferred to Nyktos, which he took along with his own and put in the Mirel bloodline along with Zutoria's soul. So that's the case. Then Zutoria's soul was reincarnated several times, and part of the reincarnation was with Sarah. But we've established that Sarah is not Zutoria, but that she has Zutoria's soul. So she has two souls. So Sarah has two souls, her own and Zutoria's. Then they took Zutoria's soul and they put it in the star, and the whole point was it will be released when she can be reborn again. There is a prophecy that basically says pretty much like first there will be one daughter and then there will be another daughter. And then the second daughter though talks about is basically Poppy. So theoretically though, now that like her soul is there, it says again Zadoria would be the only one to kill Colas. So theoretically, Poppy was born. Theoretically we have that Zutoria was probably placed again in the bloodline, or basically when theoretically when Malik left, he went to the mortal realm. He established himself as a deity, ruled Atlantia, eventually ascended Isbeth, making her into a demis because he was trying to get to Nyktos and Sarah so that they could go through the Heartmate trials, and she was given long life. That did not happen. So he basically made her into this false god. And then he was eventually entombed by Iluana, and then eventually Irelis eventually left, and Sarah was asleep because her children were basically taken in some ways, especially Irelis, who was basically captured. Anyway, So we have that, and we have a then we have that he was eventually, like, I guess he went with Jadis, and I guess something happened in the, like, he got interested at first in the mortal realm, looking for his brother as well, and as ended up with the queen, um who ended up capturing him. And then they had Millicent, who was turned into a revenant somehow, and then Poppy, who is now about to ascend. So theoretically, though, Poppy is the first primal. We find out in the book that she is a primal, not a god, and we also find out that she is. Eventually, we find out later that she's the primal of life and death, not just one or the other. She has both abilities. We know that she can feel emotions like Nyktos can, and she can bring people back to life like Sarah, and she can also like tell when people have basically died. So that's something Nyktos has. So she has both. So theoretically, Colas can die, and the balance would be maintained because she is here. She is born. She is the primal of life and death. But what if that's what it meant? That Zutoria was meant to reincarnate in Poppy and become the primal of life and death and basically um kill Colas. To me that makes sense. Like, that is what makes sense to me. But let me know about that theory. Let me know. So once that happens, eventually comes the time when uh, Sarah says goodbye to everybody. There is even a point where they honor her, where like they give her like honors to remember her basically and stuff like that, and it's really sweet. Because they like I think it's Rain that like bows to her and pledges his loyalty and to remember her, and others do the same. And it is like super super emotional, honestly, and it's been emotional since the escape, because first Nyktos immediately is in "I'm gonna take care of you" mode, which, oh my god, it's so cute. It's adorable. It's beautiful. Just like it was really cute for some reason, and it's always awesome when you see it in fantasy, when he's basically killing every single person to get to Sarah. And we're gonna talk about that because I made a really interesting discovery, both about myself and the romances I read and how I react to said romances. And I cannot wait to tell you all this and have and see your thoughts about this stuff in the comments, because I'm actually really curious if anyone has noticed this before, and if I just haven't because, well, I don't know why, but I just haven't. So, he's immediately in "Sarah, I'm going to take care of you" mode, right? And he knows what happens to chosen ones as well as gods and anyone who is kind of captured in from Colas. One of the things that we talked, that also like that we know about that happens, is with Veses, who ended up escaping the fact that she was in prison by literally chewing her way, and even chewed off her arm and everything to leave, and ends up appearing at court. And she it turns out was in love with Colas in the beginning, but Colas didn't, like, never paid any attention to her. So then she kind of got obsessed with Nyktos, and Sarah realizes, wait, the whole point was that you couldn't have Colas, so Nyktos is like the next alternative, and it's just, that is horrible. But basically, what we find out is that she makes some accusations, or I think she lies about some things, and he's like, Veses will be the entertainment for the night. And what that means is that she ends up getting assaulted by some people, including Actus's brother, which she apparently likes his like aggressive way, but also would probably not have, even if she would have gotten into it, she wasn't consenting in the beginning, which when she and Veses talk, Veses is like, no, I did not need your help. Like, don't do that. She's like, yeah, like, I hate, Sarah is just like, yeah, I hate you, but I wouldn't want this done to you. Like, that's just bad. And stuff like that. And she attempts to, I think, blackmail Sarah, and Sarah kind of blackmails her back. It's very, very, very delightful. Um, so we have that. So that's one of the things we know. So when they go to this cavern, which they call it the Bone Lands, and it's a cavern. I'm pretty sure it is. It might actually be the same cavern as in Blood and Ash, the Lilac Cavern that shows up. So it actually might be the same cavern. So he immediately is like, "Let me take care of you." Um, and I don't remember the full specifics of this scene, but she, Sarah feels a little kind of like insecure. Like, what does he not want? Almost like if he doesn't want, like, because of the things that happen, like, is he not, like, what's happening, like, why is there a, seems some kind of disconnect, I guess, where he asks if she asks herself kind of like if he wouldn't want her or something, like why he wants to do this or whatever. And she sort of talks about it, I think, and he tells her, I know what happens in Colus's court. And he assumes, rightfully so, that she was assaulted, considering the scene I discussed earlier. Um, and he tells her, though, that it doesn't matter. He's here for, like, because he's not touching her. And that's kind of what makes her feel kind of insecure. Like, he's not touching her. And she's like, what the hell happened? Why is he not touching me or whatever? And she kind of questions it, and he's like, I know what happens, like, I know what happens there, and that's what he assumed happens or whatever. And they kiss or whatever, and he, like, tells her, I'm here for whatever you need me. If you need me to kiss you, I will do that. If you need me to touch you in a certain way, I will do that. If you need me to basically like, if you haven't, like, make you have an orgasm, I will do that. If you need me to hold you, I will do that. I'm here for, like, what, however way you want me to take care of you, which makes her feel better. And she's like, okay, take care of me then. And he bathes her, he cleans her up. It's so cute. It's, oh, it's everything. It's so adorable. Again, I can't decide between Nyctos and Castile. They're both so cute. And they're both very hot men. And honestly, they're just adorable. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of toxicity in that stuff, but you know what? They're both so cute. I cannot choose between them. I gotta be honest, I cannot choose. Although Nyctos is a primal, aka a god, so Nyctos may or may not win that because Nyctos is a god, and he can do a lot of things, and one of them includes shadows, and that was that was a very hot sex scene. I admit that was very interesting for me to read about. I'm just kind of like, oh yes, it was good. So basically, what happens is that happens. That's cute. Then they get the whole soul thing, and then comes the time where she says goodbye, and they go to her lake, which is in the mortal realm. Because if you recall, in A Light in the Flame, they go to Ireland and they visit Kaylee for a little bit, and they see Delphi, who basically tells them about, like, there's no way. What ended up happening, he explained basically that what happened was that you would have been able probably to transfer the embers, but the embers have become a part of her. Now, the only way that you would get the embers is basically by taking her blood until she dies, and the embers will pass to you. And he refused, and Nietzsche's like, no, that's not gonna happen. And ends up he ends up almost killing the god, and she's like, and Sarah stops and is like, no, don't do that. Eventually they go to the woods, and they have very passionate sex, and he tells her that, and she's like, hey, promise me something. And he's like, okay. And he's like, when the time comes, promise me you'll do so, you'll do this in my lake. And he unwillingly promises her this. He doesn't want to do that, but he promises her this. It is before the capture. Also, I also want to note that in part of the book, this of a light in the flame, he says the words "I wish I could love," like for the first time, "I wish I could love," basically because of Sarah, because he cares very deeply, but because he got his cardio removed, which we're going to talk about. And I've been saying that there is no way like that, like it still has to be love between them. But the cardia somehow is like regrown or something, like it comes back or something like that. And I was proven to be somewhat right about that. That yes, it was love, but also, uh, I think the circumstances behind the cardio removal are really, really interesting and worth discussing. Um, but before I do that, I will be right back because we're about to discuss the scene where he about where she thinks she's going to die and is ascended instead. I'll be right back. So while you wait for me, listen to this ad.
Okay, so we can both admit this will not be much of an ad, at least not the way it's generally recorded. But I'm here to check in with you if you would. If you are enjoying my content, please consider subscribing to the channel. It'll really help, help it grow, and I will hopefully be more consistent. I really hope to do that. It's been rough. It's been rough for a while. So hopefully I can get back to some consistent content. But if you enjoy my content and my long reviews and everything in between that comes up with me, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Do not forget to comment and like the video as well, to boost engagement. And also because I'm very curious about your opinions, especially considering what is coming next in this video and what we still have left to talk about. So I'm extremely interested in all your opinions. Also, I mentioned before in the intro, I am a blind author. I have self-published 2 books so far. My debut is a novelette, literary fantasy, part of a series called Child of Death. And then my second book is a poetry collection. If any of those are up your alley, please consider supporting me there and getting the ebooks. I will link those below. You can also check out some of my writing just to see, if it's up your alley generally on my website, and that will also be linked below. And also on my Substack. Whatever is easier for you, I will make sure to link all those below for you. So you can check it there. If you would like to just support the channel, buying the books is a great way to do that. Both on regular retail stores and my bookshop on Ko-fi, where you can also make a donation. And finally, I would really like to eventually pull this off. If you are a an unpublished writer and are looking to get a critique on your manuscript, feel free to email me. The email is in the description. I will be happy to work with you. I will do short stories as well as novels. So I'm excited to work with you if you choose to email me, and we will discuss everything, any details that you need then. And I will give you all the details, as much detail as I can based on what you need. Anyway, with that out of the way, thank you so much for listening to this spiel. That is an ad, but really not an ad in a way, because I didn't record this like an ad. And let's get back to the video.
Okay, so thank you for listening to the ad. I appreciate it. Please consider supporting me as mentioned in the ad. Anywho, um, so let's talk about the ascension where Sarah thinks she's about to die. So we have a very emotional scene in the ascension where she is gonna say her final goodbyes or whatever, and he tells her, I would be doing like right now. I would want to like I guess I get to know you. I'd train with you every day. I would teach you how to swim. And she's like, yeah, I wish we had more time. Like part of the theme with them once the escape happened is like they wish they had more time to do all those things, especially since she didn't want to die and she wanted a future. And it was like, yeah, I wish I had more time. And then they They have a very passionate kiss, and then he bites her and he starts taking her blood, and she's like, you know, it won't be it won't be too bad. I'll probably make it to the veil. The are gonna judge me, and I think I'm fine, okay. But then her heart eventually stops, and he stops biting her because she's like he wouldn't make it painful, so it's fine because he strikes when she's a little bit distracted. And then when her heart's about to stop, though, he stops biting her, and he gives her his blood, and he's like, I'm gonna try to ascend you. And she's like, but you can't. And she's like, I watch, like, basically he just says, I can, I'm the primal of death, I can do anything, right? And he ends up like giving her his blood, and he's like, I'm gonna try anyway, at the very least I tried, basically. And he tells her, um he tells her that he loves her, and he's like, even like, this has to he tells her that this has to be love, because he's, even if he can't love, he's in love with her. And that was such a cute line. I mean, that's a cute line. Like, it's like, even if I can't love, I'm in love with you. Seriously, I think Niktos wins. I'm sorry, Castile. But at this point, I think Niktos is winning. And I mean, they're both adorable, but Nikto's like, even if I am unable to love, I am in love with you. That is an automatic win for me. And it's so cute. And she's like coming back, and she has this. We have two chapters of two things happening where where you get her kind of waking up here and there, and she has like, Niktos is talking to her, so she hears him here and there. But also, we have one chapter where we have her get one of the memories that she has is when she's like 10 years old, maybe, I think. And it was her with her mom. And she and her mom don't necessarily have the best relationship. Her mom kind of considers her a bit of a failure, especially after Niktos rejected her, though she doesn't know that Niktos rejected her when she was like 17. And and there's a memory, though, where she's walking in the garden and she sees her mom, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna like stay really, really quiet or whatever, because the mom doesn't like her. She's like, because the mom likes her when she's quiet, also when she's formal. And it was a really sad memory, because one of the things that Sarah says about her mother in the in the last in one of the last books uh is that obviously she couldn't her mom couldn't get close to her, because at the end of the day she was going to end up losing her, which I think was a really nuanced way to see her. I thought that was kind of interesting uh in that way. I think her name is Caliphate, but I could be wrong. Anyway, basically, when the mom goes out to the garden, she's like, I'm here. It's like, Seraphina, I know you're there. It's fine. So Seraphina comes out, and she's like, I'm gonna be like quiet, and she's like, or whatever. And she's like, the mom is like, I didn't know you. Like, Seraphina apologizes. She's like, what are you apologizing for, or whatever. And eventually the she asks, the mom's like, I didn't know you came here. She's like, yeah, I come here, I really like the flowers. And they talk about that, and Seraphina asks why she's there, and she's like, oh, I basically have a headache. And she's like, and stuff like that. And um and that she came for quiet. She's like, okay, I should go then. She's like, no, you can stay, you are always quiet, or whatever. And there's a point where they talk a little bit about that, and the queen is like, I should have known you'd be here. Your dad also liked those flowers. Like, he did? Yeah. He's like, yeah. He told me that there was a difference between that and some other flower, I forgot what it was, in the color. And she's like, one of them is this color, and Seraphina's like, and then the other one is this color. And she's like, yeah, that's what he said. And she started, and then the queen started crying, because it's obvious that she had a very loving relationship with the dad. And Seraphina, in all her childhood wisdom, asks, is your headache making you sad? You know what? I don't think I can write children as well as this is being written. And she's like, no, or whatever. And then she ends up leaving. And that was like the one memory like one positive memories it seems that she seems to have with her mom. So Niktos talks to her um while she is in stasis and is ascending. Which, by the way, here's where I want to talk about one thing. So in the synopsis of A Soul of Ash and Blood, we know that From Blood and Ash is being told by Castile's point of view, and that he is basically he's he gets is basically that Poppy goes into stasis and she's ascending, and he's told to talk to her, and that is what he does, and he decides to tell her this story. And parts of what we're being told from Niktos is the story of how they fell in love. Now, I know that we have another book, but I really wonder if Jennifer L. Armentrout will ever rewrite this entire series in Niktos' point of view, because I'd be into that. I'd read it. Niktos is a good character and a very complex character, and he's just awesome. So that's my those are my thoughts on that. So the so that's what I have with that. And I wanted to mention that because I think that was really interesting. Now the question I have is, though, who gave who gave him the advice? Was it does Sarah appear in A Soul of Ash and Blood? Or does Nektas appear and tell him to talk to her? Or Niktos, well, not Niktos, because Niktos can't go because of the treaty, but Sarah can, since she was born in the mortal realm. So it's either Sarah, Niktos, Sarah, Nektas, maybe Irelis, but I doubt it. It could also even be Reaver. Even Jadis could do it, but because we find out she's alive at the end of the War of Two Queens, but we don't know how. So that's that. And then, so yes, we have that. And then she wakes up like, hungry or whatever. So he went from, like, she needs blood, and he feeds her. And, they, they have sex. Of course they do, because every time that blood is taken, there is some pleasure associated to it. Um, and that's adorable. Nectus comes to say that they're okay, like, yeah, we're fine. But then comes the very, very, very hot sex scene with the shadows in the tendrils of shadows. Basically, what ends up happening is that Niktos is like, I'm about to transform into my primal form, and I'm not able to control it right now. So he tells her to go, and she doesn't, because she is into this right now, and he does. He's like, if you do, we'll have sex in this form. I'll have sex with you in this form. And he's like, okay, and he does, and he becomes primal, and tendrils of shadows kind of just start like start to her and everything. I think there's a little bit of light bondage in here too. But one of the things that I found very interesting about this stuff is in A Light in the Flame, we have a similar scene where she is masturbating, and then the shadows come in, and it's like she kind of has sex with him, but specifically through shadows. And that's like a little preview, I guess, to this, because when he transforms, he's just like, mine. And they have like double penetrative sex with where he's penetrating her with the shadows as well as, I guess, himself, basically. And it's very interesting shadow sex, and I was like, huh, that's where the whole shadow daddy came in. I mean, it was interesting. It was delightful. There was a very interesting sex scene. They have a lot of sex throughout the last couple of chapters, but the thing that is revealed is where I say the words, I was right, and I'm happy about it. So, here are the things that we find out. We find out the circumstances for the removal of the cardia. And what we find out first, by the way, I read this ending twice, and I hope I get everything correct, because I had to read it twice because I read it in DR, but I was in the first time, I was in a bit of a noisier environment. And while I was able to catch most of it, there were things I didn't. So I read like the last couple chapters a second time when I was in a quieter place, and I think I got this right. So what I understand is that when he found out about the deal, of course he was upset, and like he was resentful of, like, why the hell did my dad leave this or something to me. And then when she was born, he got like a vision and some kind of dream where he saw a girl and the destruction of the realms, basically, if I remember correctly, or that he would be the one destroying the realms, like the destruction of the realms, and it was all both realms, and it was by him that it were destroyed. Then he kind of got this uh the vision. He kind of ignored it. He's like, whatever. But then when she kind of came into his life and he started to get to know her, and I guess he started to fall for her, he he got that. I guess he got the vision again. I can't remember if he got the vision again or if he just got it that one time. And the vision was of him destroying the realms because he fell in love with her, and he decided to take away any possible chance of falling in love with her, and he got rid of the Cardia with Maya's help. But the one thing that we find out, okay, there's a scene in A Shadow in the Ember where he's giving her some rules uh, to keep her safe, and she, when they're walking, crashes into his back, and he's hurt, and he tells her, she like kind of raises the hand, and he's like, don't, no, it's fine, or like, don't, and she's just kind of rejected, I guess. And she tells him, like, are you okay, or whatever. I heard that you were fighting, what was it that he was fighting? Shades, and I heard that they can get kind of bitey or whatever. She's like, well, someone's been talking, and he tells her that he has, I think. But in the third book, we find out that when she was there, he went to remove the cardia, and when she crashed into him, that's what he was healing from. And he specifically removed the cardia because he knows that if he fell in love with her, if something happened to her, and if she didn't like ascend or whatever, like if something happened to her, all the realms would have been destroyed by his hands. Like nothing would have stopped him whatsoever. However, the Cardias, it has been established that love is even more powerful than the fates. And it has been established that has been established. But that did not stop him from falling in love with her. He still fell pretty hard for her, and still he's trying to give her the life he deserves. And he tells her, I would have, if you would have died in that ascension, and if I couldn't have you, I would have destroyed the realms. Like nothing would have stopped me. Every realm, everyone would have died. There would have been nothing. And this is where the discovery hit. Okay, you guys? Um, I watched a video. I think it's called From the Book Leo. And they had a video about villain romances. And I think that's where they were assistant to the villain. But that's not the important part. And they talk about villain romance, and you're trying to talk about. I promise there's a point to this, by the way. And they talk about like what something that they like. And one of the quotes that they said was, "A hero will sacrifice his love for the world, but a villain will sacrifice the world for their love." So I just realized a couple of things. Okay, and I like that, by the way, because that makes villain romance appealing, even though it may be a little toxic. It makes it kind of appealing because a villain is. It makes me wonder about a couple things. One, why do we love the villain so much? And two, why do we ship the villain with the hero? And the truth is, the villains can sometimes be more lovable than the hero, because the villain is willing to do. Well, actually, no. Wait. The villain and the hero have one thing in common, truth be told. They have one thing in common. And the one thing in common that the villain and the hero always have is that they are willing to do anything, or most things, to complete their goal. The only difference is that the villain is willing to go to all extremes, while the hero, most of the time, unless you're writing a very gritty hero, or even a morally gray one like in The Rising of the Shield Hero, I recommend that you watch it. It's a good anime. I will link the playlist of videos that I have on it, because everyone should know about this awesome isekai. Anyway, unless you're writing a gritty or morally gray hero, the villain specifically will go to all extremes to get to their goal, including killing anyone who may get in the way, as we can find out from Death Note. Is a great example where we follow a villain who would do exactly that. And it makes me think, those are the things that the villain and hero come common. Now, why do we ship them? Because just like the hero would This is my opinion, by the way, because just like the hero would do anything to achieve their goal, they will do anything to keep their love, no matter how extreme. And Niktos was never presented as a villain. Well, he was presented as the villain in the beginning. Like well, not really the villain, but like kind of, because he's like they made this pact with the primal of death, and if he dies, everything will be saved, and everything. So there was not really a villain presentation. Really, there was like a more of like a reason to kill him, and like she thought he made the deal, and she did it, and Sarah hated him for it a little bit because she didn't have any freedom because of it and was probably gonna die young and all that stuff. But this is what I find very interesting first, and then it made me think. I don't read dark romance a lot, though I did read Monsters in the Dark, and I enjoyed it. And I actually remind myself I need to read that novella. I think I found the novella online, and I want to read it. But also, I don't read it a lot, but I know that there are definitely dark romances for me. I know that there's a dark romance for me. If I read the Monsters in the Dark. Oh, one sec. Hold on. Okay, so yes, there is a dark romance for me. I know that, but most of the time, I read pretty sweet and what I consider mostly healthy romances. However, I cannot help but notice, looking at this, that most of the romance I read, at least fantasy romance, or even some contemporary, but mainly I'm gonna but contemporary doesn't do it as well, I think, but mostly a fantasy romance, take elements of dark romance and slide it into like the really healthy things. um and I just had to realize that most of like the things I read kind of go into that. Some contemporary romances do it, but in contemporary it just is doesn't work the same way. It's just kind of like ugh. It's not as it's more disgusting. While in fantasy, it could be a number of things, including like a you know, like a god or whatever. And in fantasy, it's a lot more interesting to read. And I find that when I'm reading a fantasy romance that may have some of these like toxic traits that I would find in a dark romance, it's a lot easier to ignore for me. Probably because it's a fantasy romance, also because sometimes it's like fae or a god, and it's like it's fae and god or whatever. I can kind of live with that. It's fine. It's not like real people. But also, I find that I don't get affected as much, and that I tend to love them, because when Nikto said I would destroy everything if I did not have you, I was kind of like, oh my god, he really is. He's cute. It's adorable. It's so cute. I know it's a problem. But I do find that when I read fantasy romance, some of the more problematic tropes that I would find in other romances are easily ignored. And I think that the reason is just what I mentioned, that it is fantasy romance, and that I do like a little bit of darkness in my romances. But also, I would hate this in a contemporary romance. And I think the reason is because contemporary romance is a romance that takes place in our real world. Meanwhile, a fantasy romance takes place in a fictional realm with theoretically most of the time different ways to talk to, or like different societies, as well as sometimes different creatures, and these different creatures act a little bit differently. I am more than willing to look for the problematic stuff and point it out, but most of the time I will not do that. So for example, when I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, uh, you know, a few people have pointed out, at least one person has pointed out, that Rhysand, not in my comments by the way, but another video, the Rhysand is abusive. And I can see exactly why they would do that. But until book 4, Court of Silver Flames, I didn't dislike him. But I can see why someone would say he's abusive. And yeah, I can agree with that, but I can still enjoy it. I think there is such thing as responsible consuming. And while I may ignore some of the problematic stuff that's in here, which, or some of the more problematic stuff that basically is like, like there is that idea that it could lead to like, if you're not with me, you're either mine or no one else's, that kind of like crime motivator. While though it is mainly a pretty healthy thing in the fantasy, where it just says like, if she was someone else, he wouldn't attack anyone, but if she was hurt in any way, though, the realms are all going to suffer. But basically, I think there's such thing as like I can ignore all the problematic stuff, and I can do all that stuff, or I can basically uh, do that, and but also be conscious about the fact that I'm doing that. And I think the most responsible way to consume certain things, even if they're problematic, is uh, noting that they're problematic, while also like knowing that they're problematic, but even then you can still enjoy it. And it's just noting that they are, yep, there's some problematic shit, but I still like it. And I think that's something that I've just come to terms with, and that this book has helped me figure out. I like some of the problematic tropes in fantasy, but I cannot always take them in contemporary romance. And a really good example of that is The Rebel's Redemption. If that book review is out by the time this book is out, I will link it in the description. But essentially, in that book, there were some problematic behaviors that I was just kind of like, no. And so was in Big Easy Secrets, where I was just like, no, 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 I would kill some people for this. In Big Easy Secrets, there would definitely be some death. If this was my fictional world, there would be death. So I'm cognizant of that now, and I think this book made me kind of realize that, and I think this was a good discovery for me. I think this was important for me to realize and understand, because again, I think that responsible consumption of media is important, as is media literacy. I think media literacy is important, but so is the consumption of media that could be problematic. If we enjoy something and it's problematic, I think we can acknowledge the problems and still enjoy them. So that is just my spiel for responsible consuming for me, at the very least. This also comes into the writing for me. Like right now, I'm writing the first draft of a dark romance, and I am acknowledging it is a dark romance. It is toxic as shit. There are some things in there. I'm not gonna tell you all about it. It is like a darker version of Sleeping Beauty, based on the darker version written by another author. I forgot the name of the author, but it was a bit darker, and based on that, I am kind of writing a like a reimagining of that, and it is definitely much darker, in than the original Sleeping Beauty retelling I wrote, which was that I'm editing. The Voice in My Dreams, but like basically, it's a darker version of like in a dark romance revolving around the god and a human, which who ends up turning who is just like, it's really interesting. I'm okay doing that between a god and a human, because it's like a god, and it just makes sense for me. But I'm writing it, and as I'm writing it, though, one of the things that I want to do is write it responsibly, and one of the things that I plan to do is to make it so that I I make sure to have the trigger warnings both in the synopsis and the and a page of the trigger warnings, because I think that's important. That is something I mentioned before about the Voice in My Dreams, which is the romance I'm currently writing. That while I think it's fine, it's sweet and everything, like it's a sweet romance, I've talked about before in vlogs how I plan to put a trigger warning for I remember mentioning this in vlogs, but anyway, I'll just mention it here. I plan to put a trigger warning on the book, because it does have discussions and explicit depictions of ableism, and I think that people should be aware of that before they go into my romance. Yes, it's a sweet and healthy romance, but that does not mean that it doesn't have what could possibly be triggering content. So I mentioned that I wanted to do that because I think it's fair to the reader. And that is, in my opinion, responsible writing. As there is responsible consumption, there's also responsible delivery of product. So that is something that I've come across, and I appreciate that this book kind of gave me the discovery that, yeah, I may like some of these problematic tropes and some of these problematic toxic things in a fantasy book, but and I don't fully love them in a in a in a like contemporary setting, and I like them, but I'm cognizant of that fact, and that I am, I think, a more responsible reader now, at least for myself, by just acknowledging that I like it, and that in fantasy romance, in specifically in this end, it's hot. No wonder I like Castile, Ash. I like Rhysand for the most part until the fourth book. That was just terrible. I love Rowan. I definitely love Rowan, and I read, and no wonder from Throne of Glass, and no wonder I love Xaden from Fourth Wing to some degree. It's no wonder. I realize that now, and the Fire and the Flesh made it possible. So, thank you for that. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with knowing that. So, yeah, so that's kind of the thing. Anyway, that is where the thing came up. So that is where he says that he would basically destroy the realms. So it makes him, the theory I want to say is I was right. The Cardia did not prevent him falling in love with her, and I'm so happy. But I don't know. The only thing I'm assuming they didn't say if it was back, like if it kind of like if he has it back again or nothing. It just says that he fell in love, and that it was he's like, I should have known that it wouldn't actually do anything, and that love would be more powerful. And I thought that was interesting. And one of the things also, the other connection to the War of Two Queens that we have is a scene that happened between Millicent and Castile. Now, between Millicent and Castile, there was a scene where she tells him it's basically she tells him that Poppy's basically not a god, that she's a primal, and that one day he might have to put her in the ground. She's like, no, it won't happen. I'm not gonna kill her. He's like, you might have to one day, because you are like, because she will destroy the realms. If something happens to you, she will destroy everything. She will destroy the realms. You are her weakness. You will either have to like she'll basically have to die in your arms, or destroy the realms. And it is the same. There are some parallels here with Nyctos and Poppy. She would destroy the realms for Castile when she ascends, basically, if something happens to him. If anything, she can be killed because she's in love with Castile, which means that Colas can potentially use Castile, which I don't doubt he eventually will, to get to Poppy and to basically try to kill her, because he would know that basically he could kill her by simply attacking the one person who she loves, and that would be Castile. And thankfully, of course, Sarah survived, and the realms wouldn't be destroyed. Instead, they'll be together. But we don't know what's going to happen in Born of Blood and Ash. Yeah, Born of Blood. Yeah, Blood. Is it? Yeah, Born of. Is it Born of Blood and Ash? Or I think it is. I think it's Born of Blood and Ash. We don't know what's going to happen there. But it kind of ends with them, I think, still in bed, and it's like they again go to another like sex scene by the end. But yeah, she tells him like the world will be destroyed if something had happened to you, and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it ends. So predictions that I have for everything in the Blood and Ash world right now. Well, first of all, there I think the fourth book will be them first gathering allies in Born of Blood and Ash. They'll have to gather allies. Definitely find out who the hell supports them. Obviously, Bele, the new a new primal, definitely does, and Vessies will probably die, and I'm okay with that. And there will be others, I think, who will who will do that. One of the things I found interesting too is that Vessi's also uh actually wait, no, I think I messed up earlier. I said that she loved Colas, but that she wouldn't Niktos because he's the next alternative. I actually think it's backwards. I remember, no, it's backwards. She loves Niktos, but since Niktos doesn't want her, Colas is the next alternative. Is what I'm getting. I think that's the best way to do it. I think I messed up earlier. But also the thing I wanted to talk about to mention is I think one of the things that in that scene that we mentioned is that when she found out. Oh wait, no. I was right. It is that she loved Colas, but Niktos was the best alternative. Anyway, when she found out that he brought Zutoria back to life, she leveled half her court. So, yeah, primals have anger issues. So it would make sense that Niktos would destroy the realms if she's not there. Um, and I will say that is a story I would want to see one day. For it was just something interesting. But anyway, I think that they would have to gather supporters. Obviously, those that are there that are like his friends and like the gods, definitely they will um they will support him. Probably some of the older primals, including Keela and so on and so forth. But then of course there will be they'll have to get rid of Colas's supporters as well. And then there will be them, entombing him basically, somehow, because he is weakened, I think, because he doesn't have all the embers. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do. As for the others, I think that again, Poppy might be Zutoria. I don't with Callum, the theory I have with Callum, since what is it? Since he was since Colas was entombed, either he escaped or they couldn't kill him, and yeah, he escaped and ended up serving and somehow ended up finding maybe he was also the one that told Malek stuff, but I have some doubts on that. But basically, he must have found Ileana somehow and told her everything, or Isbeth, and told her everything about that. So he serves Isbeth until Colas is brought back to life, basically. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Again, I enjoyed this so much, and it was such a good book. Amazing. I cannot wait for Born of Blood and Ash, and I will definitely be doing a predictions video on it based on the synopsis. So far, there's not a really long one. And yeah, I'm super excited. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And yeah, let me know, have you made a similar discovery to me when reading like this? And what are your thoughts? Let me know your theories. Anyway, yeah, I would love to have a conversation with you. Let me know everything. I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Okay, so important updates. There is a little bit of stuff I have changed my mind on here since the time I recorded this regarding responsible writing on my end. But there's also one more thing. I am no longer writing that darker reimagining of Sleeping Beauty that I mentioned then. I am also no longer vlogging, writing related videos. I've kind of decided to niche down, and I deleted my documentation of writing in the channel. And so those are the two things. But there are a couple of things that I do want to discuss and continue the discussion about this darker romance and so on and so forth, because I did change my mind a little bit. So one of the things is that if I were still writing that darker reimagining of Sleeping Beauty, and if I were to have published it, I wouldn't have categorized it as dark romance, actually. Or I won't, I like right now, if I have my, if I was still writing it right now, or if I was done right now and I was going to publish it, let's say I was going to publish it next year. If that were to be the case, I wouldn't categorize it as dark romance anymore. Instead, I would categorize it as erotic horror, just because it's a horrifying element to be the way that the story is set up, in considering where she was. And I want that distinction, because I think what is considered dark romance, things like Haunting Adeline, I now don't view them as such. I view them more as abuse romance, but not dark romance, because those books also contain assault, which my darker Sleeping Beauty reimagining also had. So because of that, they contain that. They contain a lot of non-consensual related things. They contain a lot of abusive aspects in a toxic relationship, generally speaking. So I would, if anything, categorize it more as erotic horror than dark romance. I think dark romance is something different. In a way, I think romance, generally speaking, for it to be healthy, requires consent. And the little research that I did on dark romance doesn't suggest that it would be something like Haunting Adeline in some ways. So I feel that there is a difference between something like Haunting Adeline and some of the darker, more abusive type romances and dark romance. I think that is something that I want to differentiate. So I would probably categorize it more under something like erotic horror. It's an idea I got from another booktuber who I really like, and who mentioned that, to set expectations instead of a dark romance. If some of the books that she's read, she said that if they were categorized as erotic horror, she would have reviewed them differently. But because it's categorized as dark romance, then she has all these things to point out, essentially, that are more problematic. And that's kind of how I feel about it too. But also, it feels more responsible to categorize it as something else over a dark romance, because in there is, some people take it very, very far. Or in the dark romance, they have taken it far. So and they'll use the dark romance as a way to excuse it, and say, oh, because it's dark and this happened, this is why I'm doing it, basically. And I don't want to do that. And also, I just, it gives the dark romance readers a very bad rep, and they shouldn't have that, because, again, I think I would enjoy dark romance if I find the right one. I know I can enjoy it. I did enjoy when I read Monster in the Dark by Pepper Winters, but thinking back on it, it does feel more like it is something that I would read and feel like I didn't view it as romantic, even though the genre is dark romance. I didn't view it as romantic, so that might be why I was able to kind of distance myself a little bit, as well. So that's something that could be the case. Also, on the dark romance spectrum, like the darker parts of romantasy, where you have a character like Niktos saying, hey, I would have destroyed the realms if I didn't have you, basically. I think it's interesting too, because besides those little outbursts, if you would, not little outbursts, but like besides those things, Niktos is a very healthy partner. Generally speaking, he communicates with her. There is some miscommunication between them from time to time, but generally he wants the best for her. He denies her nothing that she doesn't want. He never does something that, at least unintentionally, that would make her feel terrible. Her consent is important to him, and whatever she says is considered. So, that's the fact that he says that he would have destroyed the realms. It just feels like something that, a god or fae or whatever could say, because it's not it's not in the, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, in that area. But either way, he still cares about her, and not in that toxic way that Colas says that he cares about Zutoria. Colas reminds me kind of if you have decided to ever do a deep dive on Cinderella, and you read a bunch of the different versions of Cinderella, as well as Snow White, you will find that in a lot of those versions, the prince, when he sees I'm gonna go with Cinderella because Cinderella, well, when he sees both of them, really, when he sees them in a way, especially in Cinderella, it says that he had an urge or he wanted to possess her, and that is what Colas sort of reminds me of, that type of Cinderella like prince, and everything. That's kind of what he reminds me of. He's the type of person. He's the type of a love interest that wants to make it very clear that he's only she's only his. But there have been incidents, not incidents, I'm sorry, there have been instances where, Sarah has said something. I think there was, when they, if I remember correctly, in book 2 of this series. By the way, as of now, I have not read book 5 or 6 of Blood and Ash, I believe, as I mentioned in the intro. So anyway, the whole there in book 2 there is she doesn't know what has happened, but after she went out with Nectus to find out where Delphi was, she walked into Nyctos's like office and found Veses feeding from him, and she got very angry and very jealous. She actually ended up falling asleep for 3 days, from what I remember, and she tells him that after this ends, like after they save the world and they figure out what the hell, like after he takes like after they figure out what they need to do, she wants freedom. She wants to make another deal with him where she is free. She doesn't want to do this anymore because she felt betrayed by him, and he didn't argue with her. He didn't fight her. He said okay. So he that was a thing. And then she found out what happened, that she was essentially blackmailing him, and she was angry. She wanted to kill Veses, but that did not end up happening. And then they kind of got back together, and it was pretty much they had better communication since then, and of course they were separated for book 3. But that is a thing that he wouldn't have kept her against her will, something that Colas would have done. And a lot of these romantasy love interests are similar in some way to Nyctos. And I think that's what feels different, I think, to me when reading something contemporary over reading this in fantasy, because I can also separate the genres. I can usually separate stuff from reality and fiction. Like, I like this stuff in fiction, but in real life, if someone says that to me, I'll be like, no, I remember I got something to do. I'm not interested, right? So in real life, I wouldn't want any of this, but in fiction, I love this. And I think the reason is that I can separate it, but also when it comes to contemporary and fantasy, I can usually, the genre, there's a difference for me when I'm experiencing contemporary romance, and I am experiencing and I'm experiencing something like a romantasy. There is a difference, because the genre makes it so, because it's not in our real world. It doesn't have our real places. This is a fictional world where we have gods and we have humans and we may have other magical creatures, but it is not our real world, and that makes it easier to separate. So that's how I can enjoy usually the problematic stuff. And believe it or not, I have had those. I did look at this way of reading toward other things that I enjoy. I haven't talked much about them in the channel because I know that these are things that that while I like them, it's difficult to talk about in a way because I know the implications of it. I'm specifically talking about Harry Potter. If you're unaware, the author of Harry Potter is someone who discriminates against trans people, and wrote quite the essay in 2020. And there has been definitely some debate about enjoying Harry Potter, as well as generally speaking, not enjoying Harry Potter, but generally having Harry Potter or supporting Harry Potter in any way. Because if you do support her in any way, if you buy the books, if you do any of that, she essentially would use that money to support causes that would harm the trans community. I'm very much in support of the trans community, and I did buy the Harry Potter books, I think way before that in Audible. Don't remember, but that is a thing. And it was a series that really influenced some of my writing as a teenager. And specifically book 3 is my favorite of the books because I could relate in some ways. So in my teens it meant a lot, and to some degree it still means a lot to me in my adult life. And there are things that I still love about this series. And I have not, I had considered doing a review of it at some point, but I did not, of the channel. And I know the implications of doing such a thing. But I feel I have decided to sort of take the, I guess take the same lesson and apply it to that as well in some ways, because while I understand the implications and I know all that comes with it, I will acknowledge everything that comes with it. It is one of those things that it's not, I think, as simple and as black and white as some people make it out to be in some ways. I think we can have some nuance in between, and that is what I try to do in some ways. And hey, there are still people that technically do make Harry Potter content still, and they don't seem to relate directly back to her. It's just something that people enjoy, and it's still a pop culture phenomenon. Kind of like we enjoy stuff and we're like, yeah, these people are terrible, and but we still like certain things. And unfortunately, terrible people can make good art, and that is a very sad fact, that terrible people can make good art. And that is kind of how I have dealt with that. But it's that same lesson I feel like I learned reading this book kind of in a way applies to the way I consume things in my life. And I don't know if I'll change my mind, technically speaking, especially considering how much I separate art from the artist. I generally do have a I follow the philosophy of death of the author. So that's kind of what I do when I read these books. If I were to read Harry Potter and enjoy it the way I do, that's kind of how I do it. But I know it's complicated, especially because she's still alive. So I could change my mind on this, but that is the lesson. This lesson is kind of how or like the discovery I made with this book is kind of how I take that into account as well for certain other things. Which does remind me, at some point I do want to read some of the books that came that were 2 books that were published that I know were originally Harry Potter fan fiction, and I'm curious to read them. So that's where we're at with that. Anyway, that is a really weird transition note for this one. I think there is one more thing I did want to bring up as well, though, for the review that I didn't talk about. Because I guess I didn't think of it at the time, but I want to talk about villains. I talked about villain romance, and I think what is so enjoyable about them, and how it was in the video I referenced in the video. Leo, the book Leo, mentioned that, a hero will sacrifice his love for the world, but a villain will sacrifice the world for their love. I also wanted to talk about just villains generally, and one of the things I think that makes a really good villain. And I want to bring in an example of a bad villain, in my opinion. And it is a book that I that I had a review of, but I lost the footage. I'll probably reread it just so I can review it, because the 3rd book of the series is coming up. And while the book I'm talking about is actually bad, it makes for a really good background reading, and for looking at it and saying, this is not how I would want to write, my villains. But what makes a good villain for me as a reader is a villain that has facets. And Polis has, facets in his own twisted way. He is twisted, but he has facets, kind of like Isbeth / Ileana. kind of like her, they had facets in the way that they dealt with certain things, and the way that Ileana would protect her daughters and everything she did for them, even in a twisted way. She still cared about them. And Colas, in a weird way, is kind of like this, with Zatoria, but also he has a lot of facets, a lot of interesting things in how he felt about his brother. And it said, like, he has love for his brother, but also he was extremely jealous of him, because when he was the primal of life, everybody respected him, but no one respected the primal of death. And there is resentment now between them, or eventually resentment developed between them. There was also an interesting thing about it too, is that because of that, he justified essentially, a lot of stuff, including saying things like that. I think her name is Marcella, the Nyctos's mom. He said things like, she originally loved me, but essentially saying that, his brother, I guess, almost got in the way or whatever. So there are facets to Colas, where there are facets of kindness in him, or what he believes is kindness, but he is still evil. And that is one of the things I kind of like about him as a villain. And I want to bring up The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. Now, I should say, I watch Moreci's content. I enjoy her content. I enjoy her personality, and I think the sass and everything in between. I do enjoy it. She's a really interesting content creator, and I like her advice. But that doesn't mean that because you give good writing advice, you are a good writer. And her villain in this romantasy series, really bad. Kind of like all her characters in this series. They're all kind of cardboard boxes or whatever. But the main villain, Rondes, is essentially a cartoon villain, who wants to essentially take over the world and kill his own daughter. He killed his wife. Spoilers, I guess. He killed his wife, the previous savior, and was hoping that would have killed his daughter, but it didn't happen. So he was essentially trying to kill her in order to take over the world and do all that fun stuff. But he is not a good villain, because there's no other motivation besides just power. And while that could be a motivation, that's fine. But even if that's the only motivation, there's no character development toward him. He's like the most cartoon villain you will find. There is also an antagonist in her books, Cosima, who, by the end of The Savior's Sister, we found out she was essentially, supposedly, having this like affair with Rondes. However, the way that it shows up on the text is that she was trying to use what she could to survive. And the way that she could use to survive was her body. But the Layla immediately considered her, even from the very first, from her very first appearance, she was looked at as terrible, essentially. Like, she, from like the very first page, she was immediately a terrible person. And somehow, and they were kids in the very first time, and somehow they didn't grow out of it, and she essentially is the quote-unquote villain, supposedly, or at least a villain, and part of it being that she was essentially being, essentially seemingly having this affair with Rondes, who has much more power over her, and everything that comes in between. And she was a lost opportunity in that book, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because the text once implies that she is bad, that she's evil, but the way that it reads is more like she was trying to survive. But and when you make black and white characters, as Moreci has, essentially you have these people are good, these people are bad. And while that is a thing that I think Jennifer L. Armentrout does as well here, where it's obvious that Nyctos is good and that Colas is bad, Colas also has, essentially facets where Rondes does not. And I think that's what makes Colas a good villain. the different facets that he feels like a character. He feels like an amalgamation of different people we could know, or someone that could have, generally speaking, been real. It also kind of fits into the story, like the story logic, because it says that once gods and primals, when they stay too long, instead of like going to rest, like without resting, they essentially become more evil, essentially. And that kind of makes sense with the world logic. It also makes some sense with within the way I, at the very least, picture gods. So I'm not very familiar with the Bible, the Christian Bible specifically, but my understanding is that in the Christian Bible you have God is a jealous God, one who will do things to get things right. Like, he flooded the world. He did things that essentially would be considered quite bad. So to me, considering that a lot of people believe in God, but the Bible also portrays him not always as a good God, but as a jealous God. It makes sense, because gods, if we're looking at it in the Christian Bible, for example, could theoretically are parts of us. If you look at like Greek mythology as well, they're humanized in a way. And I don't think that I could be wrong, but I don't think the Christian Bible is any different in that it took it built God up almost like a human. It gave he has a human characteristics, so he could be good, but he could also be temperamental and jealous and everything in that form. So to me, the fact that he essentially said, yeah, I would have destroyed, that Niktos essentially said, I would have destroyed the realms if something would have happened to you, made sense in the fact that he's essentially a little bit above a god, but still a type of god. It just makes sense to me because of who he is, which is why it's a lot easier for me to look at it and go, yeah, this makes sense. There's also a bit of a separation to, I think, when I read these types of romances from contemporary in a weird way, because of something I heard a couple of years ago in one or two videos. Apparently, and essentially, it is it was related to Twilight, and specifically of all things, and it was that there was a different type of separation from Edward and Jacob. It was a bit different in that Edward is a vampire that we will never ever meet. Hence Niktos, being a god. We would likely never meet like a primal or whatever. But Jacob, we all know a Jacob. We all know that type of stalker. We know that type of person actually exists. But there is a little bit of separation with someone like Edward. Even though you kind of understand that it is wrong, there might be a little bit of separation from time to time, because he's a vampire. I didn't fully separate it because it was still in our contemporary realm, but I do understand that logic, and that is also the logic that I have when it comes to fantasy. There's a lot of separation that I can do, like a lot. And yeah, those are kind of like my current thoughts on that as well, like future me's different thoughts. And what else? Oh, yes. I did want to also say, I think I recorded this video when I was in DR in 2020, or I'm sorry, I read the book when I was in DR in 2023. 2022. That's an interesting thing to consider. I think I recorded this 3 years ago. maybe a little more. I'm not sure. But I mentioned that being in DR when I read the book. So I believe it was during I believe it was, no, not 2022, sorry, 2023. I believe it was in 2023. And that was wow, that was a while ago. And it was an interesting time to be on vacation for me. And I can't believe that's when I read the book. Oh wow, that's interesting. Anyway, with all that said, we are going to move on to the next part of the video, which is essentially another video that I filmed, and it is predictions. So whatever you might hear in that video, please remember this is technically this video was filmed separate from this current one right now. So let's go on to the next video, which is essentially my predictions at the time, and I'll let you know if I agree or and then we'll go into the outro, and I'll say any final thoughts.
Okay, by the time I'm recording this, the book is already out, but I want to talk about my predictions anyway, and especially because I want to read. I want to get. I got like the sampler for the first 6 chapters of this book, and I want to do a reaction before I read the series to see what I want to like, how I feel about it. And because doing a reaction for the first like 5 chapters of um wait, why can't I remember this? A Light in the Flame was really really fun. So I want to just kind of do it. And I want to, but I want to record this first. So here we go. So let's talk about Born of Blood and Ash, the fourth and final book in the Flesh and Fire series. So this is where Sarah and Nyktos' love story comes to an end. They're favorites, and yeah, I kind of just, and I also know that the next book in Blood and Ash, the Primal of Blood and Bone, is supposed to be the last one as well. So that's very sad. But I can't wait to see how they both kind of end and see what we have. So anyway, let's talk about this. From number one, oh, by the way, spoilers for everything. From number one New York Times best-selling author Jennifer L. Armentrout comes the thrilling conclusion to her beloved Flesh and Fire series. Definitely beloved by me. I do love this series. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you have not seen, if you're new here, I'm an Nexus. I'm a blind author, content creator, and freelancer. If you would like beta reading services, please email me. The description, it's in the description. Anyway, let's continue. The line between love and obsession has never been wider. And considering that, what's his name? What is this guy's name? Um, oh, Colas. And considering that Colas loves, quote unquote, loves her, his love is very toxic. Agreed. While Sarah is finally free of Colas and back with those she loves, not everything is calm. As expected, memories of all she's endured still haunt her, but Sarah finally has hope for a future with the other half of her heart and soul. Aww. Nyktos desires, loves, and accepts every part of her, even the monstrous bits she still battles. That's because Nyktos is basically an angel, so he is king. More than ever, Sarah and Ash have everything under the realms to fight for, and Nyktos has no doubt Sarah is fit to be the queen of the gods. Well, of course, I mean, to some degree, it was a destiny, that was gonna happen, and it's reminding me of like the confession we got at the end of um of oh, come on, what is it? A Fire in the Flesh by Nyktos kind of makes it so that we know there was definitely destiny. Like the fates were somehow involved in this. But like it was interesting because he loves her so much that he saw the realms, everything being destroyed, and he said that if the ascension wouldn't have worked and she would have been killed, everything would have been destroyed. There would have been nothing left. So yes, he accepts her and desires her, but it is that kind of love. And listen, I'm here accepting that I love this type in fantasy. It's okay. In real life, I would run away, but in fantasy, I'm here for it. But yeah, so it's definitely destiny, and it works out. But she must find that faith within herself if they hope to convince the other courts to support them against Colas and make Elysium and the mortal realm better, safer places for all. Yeah, and I can already say that Vesi's court will probably not support her since she originally loved Colas. So she'll probably Vesis will probably definitely support Colas. So I think at least one of them there, but there will be other maybe some of the older primals will probably not support them either. So yeah. But as Sarah begins to piece together the importance of her bloodline and the true meaning behind the foreboding prophecy, it becomes clear that everything that has happened and is yet to come is much bigger than Colas and his dark obsessions. Okay, yes, I can see it because one of the things that was said in the War of Two Queens is that we learned that the prophecy in even you even learn it a little bit in the fan collectible, I'm gonna call it, which is the one written in Willa Collins' point of view, kind of like journal entries and stuff like that. We find out that the prophecy technically relates to both Sarah and Poppy, and that the prophecy itself will not basically be it will not be it will not come true without both of them doing their part, which means that in this case she will have to do her Sarah will have to probably do her part to make it easier for Poppy to do hers in some way, and it'll have to probably be in this prequel, or if they get together and reunite in blood of primal of blood and bone. We also know that Poppy is the first primal born in her um, for a while, and that any children that she has will be a primal. But there's also I also have a theory based on the fan book that it sounds like Castile is a primal because he is a descendant of, I think, Actus, or so it is kind of one of those things. So I do think that's part of it. But also we find out that technically in a we know that Colas can't die right now. Where Sarah is, Colas cannot die because the balance will be lost. Colas is the true primal of death, and even though Nyctos has the primal of death, he wasn't destined to be the primal of death. So Colas can't actually die. He has to be. This is why he was put underground to sleep, because he cannot die. Death needs to exist, as does life. But with Poppy being a primal of both life and death, which is known to be kind of which is something that shouldn't be. She is the person who will basically hold that balance now in my theory. That would be my theory. So I'm kind of excited to see where that goes. They cannot help but wonder exactly how much influence the Fates have had in what their ultimate goal is. I do want to know their goal, but I imagine they have an influence in everything since they're supposed to be the ones to make the balance work. What Sarah does know for sure is that they can trust very few, including her. Ooh, why, honey? A battle between the gods is brewing, and heartbreaking losses are imminent, with the true primal of death strengthening. Of course. Well, I can imagine that most of them are either going to be sleeping or dead by the end of the story, because I know most of the gods went to sleep. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how that, if we actually see that occur in Born of Blood and Ash. Excuse me. With a family of the heart. What? With a family of the heart willing to battle by their side. How does that work? With the family of the heart? I'm confused by this. Willing to battle by their side. Can Sarah and Nyctos stop Colas before he destroys the realms, or will they all disappear in a fiery inferno of blood and ash? Now, we know that she does stop him, but only temporarily if you've read Blood and Ash. The question is, how do they come up with it, and how are they able to weaken him enough to put him underground? And the line between justice and vengeance has never been so thin. I mean, I'm here for the vengeance part. So I would imagine in this book, having read this synopsis, that there is going to be, there's still going to be a lot of romance, obviously, in this book, but I imagine that there's going to be a lot of secrets discovered related to the fates, the things that they are doing, the things that they have done. Also, apparently, because of the importance of Sarah's bloodline, what happened. Oh, we know what happened with her dad, but also what happens, like why we never learned. We have yet to learn why exactly Niktos' dad chose Sarah for this. Why we never found out exactly why he decided that she will be like that to put it in the Murel bloodline. And I imagine that is going to come up in this book as well, because I think he told Niktos to go to a specific place if he wants to find out or something. Um, so I think that's going to be a big part of the story, and I cannot wait to see how that comes up, because there has to be a reason why the Murel bloodline was the one chosen. Maybe something in the past. Uh, were the Murels uh, were they descendants of gods or something along those lines? Is that why he chose that bloodline? Um, which made Sarah more apt to take the embers and stuff like that. So that is my question, and I cannot wait to see where it goes. So let me know your thoughts on Born of Blood and Ash. If you've read it, please no spoilers. I would appreciate it. These are just my predictions and my thoughts as I prepare to eventually get to the book and then review it here. So yeah, let me know in the comments though, if you haven't read it, your thoughts.
Okay, so we have reached the end of this journey together. I don't actually have any like final thoughts. I think I kind of agree with these predictions so far. The only thing I do want to say, and because I was going to mention it earlier in the video, but I forgot it as well, but I can now mention it. There seems to be some connection between the Blood and Ash world and the series Awakening by Jennifer L. Armentrout. The first book in that series is Fall of Ruin and Wrath, which I read and loved, but again, my review sort of got, my footage got erased for that review, so I haven't posted it, but I will at some point. I also do have a review for the fan collector, the collected fan book, the fan collector style book, Visions of Flesh and Blood, which I will post soon. So that is like the two main things that I wanted to say. I still don't know where the connections of Fall of Ruin and Wrath come in, or just like the Awakening series. As far as I know, there's no book 2 there yet, and I'm subscribed to Armentrout's newsletter, so I'll find out. There's also no reaction to the sample 5 chapters. I never ended up doing it, so there won't be a reaction to that. Instead, there's just going to be reviews whenever I can get them out. So that's like the main things that I wanted to say. I hope you enjoyed this journey. I definitely enjoyed editing it and re-listening to the stuff I had to say. I will hopefully soon be rereading all the books so that I can read Primal of Blood and Bone, which, if I understand it correctly, it's actually not the last book. It's the book that ends Castile and Poppy's love story, but it seems to be the penultimate book in Blood and Ash, because I believe there's supposed to be another one, and I don't think it'll be on their point of view. I'm not as entirely certain of that one, but I will find out when when I get there, and I will let you all know that. So the next 2 videos, I'm not going to say next 2 weeks because I know that stuff happens and I'm generally really busy. I'm doing as much editing as I can today, but we'll see. But the next 2 videos are actually going to also be in the Blood and Ash world. I will be reviewing A Soul of Ash and Blood next, and after that, I'll be reviewing Visions of Flesh and Blood. And then after that, it will be Bridgerton. So let's see how that works out. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you enjoy my content, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. That way you can get notified when I post new videos. like and comment as well. If you would like to check out my writing, check out my website where you can get some of my writing for free. And if you enjoy it, please consider supporting the channel by one, subscribe to the blog if you want to see more of my writing, or my Substack, which I will also link. A lot of the content for Substack and my blog kind of intertwine, but Substack will usually get stuff first, just of because of my occasional stuff. So it'll usually get it first, but we will see how if that continues. But Substack or my website, you'll find my writing in. So you can go there. And if you like those, consider supporting me by purchasing my book. I have a literary fantasy, and I'm working on the second book in that series. And I have a poetry collection. So if any of those are up your alley, consider supporting me by looking into my books. You can get them from your favorite retailer in ebook and audiobook form. You can also get it direct. You can also get the ebook from me on Ko-fi, where you can also make a donation there. And if you are interested in getting your manuscript critiqued, email me. I am happy to do so. I offer that as a service if you would like. And I would hopefully get it off. I would like to get it off the ground eventually, but hey, I want to market that in case you are interested. And yeah, and with that out of the way, I will see you soon in my next video. Until then, consume stories.